They came not with crowns, but with chariots. Not with temples, but with tactics. In the silence of the desert, a thunder rose, bronze against bone, wheels over sand. Egypt, ancient and eternal, was about to be outmatched by a new kind of power. This is the untold story of the Hyksos, the foreign rulers who didn't just conquer Egypt. They re-engineered the very art of war. In the tapestry of ancient Egyptian history, the Hyksos stand out as a powerful, yet often misunderstood chapter. Emerging from the eastern lands of the Levant, these peoples crossed into the Nile Delta around the mid-2nd millennium BCE, bringing with them not only new customs and culture, but a formidable military presence that would reshape Egypt's destiny. Unlike the traditional Egyptian armies, which had long relied on mass infantry, simple weapons, and a ritualistic approach to warfare, the Hyksos introduced a wave of innovations. New weapons forged from bronze, the lightning-fast horse-drawn chariot, and tactical strategies born from centuries of conflict in the Near East. Their military power was the foundation upon which they built their rule over Lower Egypt during the Second Intermediate Period, a time of political fragmentation and upheaval. Through superior weaponry, mobility, and strategic acumen, the Hyksos not only conquered but controlled a land that had resisted foreign invaders for centuries. This military revolution forced Egypt to reconsider its defenses, tactics, and ambitions, ultimately setting the stage for the rise of the new kingdom, Egypt's imperial golden age. In this documentary, we journey into the heart of the Hyksos military machine, exploring the weapons they wielded, the tactics they employed, and the enduring impact they left on Egyptian warfare and beyond. Before the thunder of Hyksos chariots echoed across the Nile Delta, Egypt's military was a very different force, one shaped by centuries of tradition, geography, and divine kingship. In the Old and Middle Kingdoms, Egyptian warfare was largely ceremonial and defensive. Armies were composed mainly of infantrymen armed with simple weapons like wooden spears tipped with copper, slings, and short bows. These forces moved slowly and in tight formations, often led by the pharaoh, whose divine status inspired loyalty but rarely translated into battlefield innovation. Battles were seasonal, limited in scale, and often seen as expressions of royal power or religious ritual rather than total war. Egypt's natural barriers, deserts, seas, and cataracts, shielded the kingdom from large-scale invasions. Fortifications were modest, with mud brick walls protecting key towns but no massive military infrastructure. The idea of rapid, mobile warfare was foreign to Egyptian commanders. Metallurgy was still in an early stage. Copper weapons, though functional, were soft and dull quickly, limiting their effectiveness. Shields were basic wooden constructions, offering limited protection. Archery, while present, lacked the power and range that later innovations would bring. In this context, Egyptian warfare was defensive, conservative, and bound by tradition. The army's role was to maintain order and defend borders rather than to aggressively expand or innovate. This status quo would soon be shattered by a force from the northeast, the Hyksos. The Hyksos were not simply foreign invaders descending upon Egypt unprepared. Rather, they were the product of a dynamic fusion of peoples and military traditions spanning the Near East. Originating primarily from the Levantine region, modern-day Syria, Lebanon, Israel, and Palestine, they were a coalition of Semitic-speaking groups, including Canaanites, Amorites, and other West Asiatic tribes. This crossroads of civilizations exposed the Hyksos to a rich tapestry of military innovations long before their arrival in Egypt. From the expansive city-states of Mesopotamia to the mountainous regions of Anatolia, new techniques in metallurgy, chariot warfare, and siege tactics were already evolving. The Hyksos carried these advances with them, blending them with local traditions to create a formidable military identity. One of the most significant influences on their military technology was the early use and refinement of the horse-drawn chariot. While primitive chariots had existed in parts of the ancient world, the Hyksos introduced lighter, faster, and more maneuverable models. Their expertise in breeding and training horses for warfare gave them a decisive advantage in mobility and speed on the battlefield. Alongside chariots, the Hyksos mastered the production and use of bronze weaponry, a technology that had revolutionized warfare across the Near East. Their weapons featured stronger and more durable materials, including composite bows that could shoot with greater power and accuracy than the simple bows used by the Egyptians. The Hyksos also brought with them tactical knowledge shaped by centuries of conflict and alliances in a complex political landscape. Their strategies incorporated hit-and-run attacks, ambushes, and the use of terrain to their advantage, approaches that contrasted sharply with Egypt's more traditional and rigid methods. By the time they established their capital at Avaris in the Nile Delta, the Hyksos were not just settlers, but bearers of a military tradition that bridged East and West, old and new. Their fusion of cultures and martial knowledge made them a force Egypt had never before encountered, and one that would forever change the course of its history. Among the many innovations the Hyksos introduced to ancient Egypt, none was more transformative than the horse-drawn war chariot. This sleek, swift vehicle redefined the very nature of warfare, bringing mobility, speed, and shock tactics to a battlefield previously dominated by foot soldiers and slow-moving formations. The origins of the chariot lie in the steppes and plains of the Near East, where early wheeled vehicles had been developed for transport and later adapted for warfare. But the Hyksos refined the design, creating a lightweight frame built for agility and speed. Constructed from sturdy woods like acacia and cedar, the chariot featured spoked wheels with rawhide bindings, designed to absorb shocks from the rough terrain of the Nile Delta. Typically manned by two warriors, a driver and an archer, the chariot allowed rapid movement across open ground. The driver controlled the horses, steering the vehicle with skill honed through rigorous training, while the archer wielded a powerful composite bow. This combination enabled the Hyksos to execute hit-and-run attacks, striking quickly before retreating to safety. The impact of the chariot on Egyptian warfare was immediate and profound. Prior to its introduction, Egyptian armies relied heavily on massed infantry formations armed with spears, bows, and slings. The chariot, however, introduced an entirely new dimension of tactical flexibility and psychological warfare. The sight of chariots charging across the battlefield, arrows raining down from mounted archers, would have been both awe-inspiring and terrifying to Egyptian soldiers unaccustomed to such speed and precision. The strategic advantages of the chariot extended beyond mere battlefield mobility. It allowed the Hyksos to conduct effective reconnaissance, raid deep into enemy territory, and coordinate complex maneuvers that disrupted traditional Egyptian tactics. Moreover, the ability to deploy these vehicles in large numbers gave the Hyksos a significant edge in open-field engagements. Egyptian rulers quickly recognized the threat posed by the Hyksos chariot and began efforts to incorporate it into their own armies. By the time of the New Kingdom, chariots had become a symbol of Egyptian military might, used extensively by pharaohs like Thutmose III and Ramesses II in their campaigns across the Near East. The Hyksos did not just introduce new styles of fighting to Egypt, they fundamentally transformed the nature of warfare with their superior weaponry, crafted through advanced metallurgical techniques that far surpassed the older Egyptian copper tools. Their mastery of bronze, an alloy of copper and tin, provided weapons that were not only harder and more durable, but also sharper, more reliable, and more efficient in battle. One of the most notable weapons in their arsenal was the composite bow. Unlike the simple self-bows used by Egyptians, which were made from a single piece of wood and limited in power and range, the composite bow was a masterpiece of ancient engineering. Made by laminating wood, horn, and sinew together, it had tremendous elasticity and strength. This allowed Hyksos archers to shoot arrows at much greater distances and with greater force, able to pierce armor and inflict serious damage before the enemy could even get close. The bow was compact and light enough to be used effectively from a moving chariot, making Hyksos archers deadly mobile forces on the battlefield. In close combat, the Hyksos wielded a variety of bronze weapons that were carefully designed for both offensive and defensive purposes. Their daggers and short swords were far superior to the copper blades commonly used by Egyptians. These weapons were sturdier, maintained their edge longer, and were often crafted with innovations such as tangs, a design where the blade extended into the handle to provide a stronger grip and reduce the risk of breaking during battle. Some of these swords had leaf-shaped blades that maximized cutting efficiency, capable of slashing through leather armor and even damaging the wooden shields used by their opponents. The Hyksos also employed battle axes, which were often crescent-shaped and forged from bronze. These axes were formidable weapons capable of delivering powerful cleaving blows. Their design allowed warriors to strike with great force, sometimes breaking through enemy shields or armor. Unlike the simple hand axes of earlier Egyptian armies, these axes were not just tools but dedicated weapons optimized for combat. The presence of such axes in the Hyksos arsenal shows a clear emphasis on shock and power in close-quarters fighting. Spears and javelins were also important components of the Hyksos military toolkit. These weapons were fitted with carefully shaped bronze heads, often barbed or leaf-shaped, that made them effective for both throwing from a distance and thrusting in hand-to-hand combat. The ability to throw javelins before closing with an enemy allowed Hyksos warriors to soften enemy lines, disrupting formations and creating openings for chariot charges or infantry assaults. Beyond the weapons themselves, the Hyksos were also skilled in crafting shields and armor to complement their offensive capabilities. Their shields, constructed from wood and sometimes reinforced with bronze fittings or copper rivets, offered greater protection than those used by Egyptian soldiers. They often used leather or padded armor, which not only shielded warriors from arrows and blows, but also allowed flexibility and movement during combat, something essential for the hit-and-run tactics favored by Hyksos forces. Their understanding of metallurgy extended to tools for siege and defense as well. The Hyksos introduced the use of bronze in crafting more durable tools that could be used to construct fortifications or breach walls, a key factor in their ability to hold cities such as Avaris against Egyptian counterattacks. This combination of superior weapons and protective gear gave the Hyksos a distinct advantage over Egyptian forces, who at the time were still relying heavily on older technologies. The effectiveness of Hyksos weaponry was demonstrated not only in open battle, but also in their ability to maintain control over strategic locations for several decades. Their technological edge forced Egypt to rapidly innovate and incorporate many of these weapon designs into their own military by the time of the New Kingdom. While much attention has been given to the offensive capabilities of the Hyksos, their swift chariots and deadly weapons, their defensive innovations were equally significant in establishing and maintaining their dominance in ancient Egypt. The Hyksos understood that victory in war depended as much on protection and defense as on attack and maneuver. Their advances in armor, shields, and fortifications marked a clear departure from traditional Egyptian military practices, signaling a new era in ancient warfare. One of the most striking features of the Hyksos military was their use of armor, a rarity among earlier Egyptian soldiers, where Egyptian warriors often fought with minimal protective gear, sometimes only a simple loincloth or leather apron. The Hyksos wore padded or leather armor that absorbed blows and shielded vital parts of the body. This armor was likely made from layered textiles reinforced with leather strips or possibly bronze scales, providing flexibility as well as protection. The introduction of such body armor allowed Hyksos soldiers to engage more aggressively in close combat and withstand the barrage of arrows and melee attacks common on ancient battlefields. Complementing their armor were the shields used by Hyksos warriors. Unlike the relatively basic wooden shields used by Egyptians, Hyksos shields came in various shapes, including round and rectangular forms, often reinforced with bronze or copper fittings. These enhancements improved durability, allowing the shield to better deflect arrows, sword strikes, and even axe blows. The shields were likely constructed from multiple layers of wood and covered with leather to absorb impact, a design that would have provided both protection and lightness, allowing soldiers to maneuver without being weighed down. These defensive tools were not limited to personal equipment. The Hyksos also revolutionized fortification architecture. Their capital, Avaris, was heavily fortified with massive mud brick walls, bastions, and defensive towers that reflected architectural styles from the Levant and Mesopotamia more than traditional Egyptian designs. These fortifications were carefully planned to defend against siege warfare, a method that was becoming increasingly important in the ancient Near East due to evolving military technologies. Avaris featured complex defensive layers, including a moat, outer and inner walls, and strategic placements of gates and towers. The city's fortifications allowed the Hyksos to maintain control over the Nile Delta for decades, repelling Egyptian attempts to retake the territory. Such engineering feats were a testament to their knowledge of military architecture and urban defense, providing safe havens for troops and resources during prolonged conflicts. Moreover, the Hyksos likely employed siege technologies influenced by their Near Eastern origins. Though direct evidence is scarce, their familiarity with chariots, bows, and bronze tools suggests they understood the importance of battering rams, scaling ladders, and possibly early siege towers. Their skill in metallurgy would have allowed the production of bronze implements necessary for breaching city walls or defending against Egyptian counter-sieges. The combination of personal armor, advanced shields, and urban fortifications made Hyksos forces formidable opponents. Egyptian armies, accustomed to fighting in open terrain without heavy protective gear, were initially ill-equipped to counter these innovations. Over time, Egyptian rulers would adopt many of these defensive strategies and technologies, learning from the Hyksos example to fortify their own cities and equip their soldiers with better protection. The Hyksos did not simply rely on superior weapons and armor. Their success was equally rooted in a tactical doctrine that emphasized flexibility, mobility, and psychological impact. Their approach to warfare contrasted sharply with the more rigid and ceremonial strategies traditionally employed by Egyptian forces. At the heart of Hyksos tactics was the concept of mobility. The horse-drawn chariot was not merely a weapon platform, but a strategic tool that enabled rapid movement across the battlefield. Hyksos commanders deployed chariot units to perform hit-and-run attacks, striking swiftly at enemy formations and retreating before a counterattack could be mounted. This tactic sowed confusion and disrupted the tight infantry ranks typical of Egyptian armies, undermining their cohesion and morale. Hyksos forces excelled in skirmish warfare, favoring engagements that avoided prolonged frontal confrontations unless conditions were highly advantageous. By leveraging the speed of their chariots and the range of their composite bows, they could harass enemy troops from a distance, inflicting casualties while minimizing their own exposure. This style of warfare required skilled coordination between drivers and archers, honed through extensive training and battlefield experience. In addition to mobility, the Hyksos employed flanking maneuvers and encirclement tactics. Chariots would circle around the enemy to attack from the sides or rear, where defenses were weaker. This strategic envelopment not only maximized damage, but also created opportunities for infantry and other units to exploit breaches in enemy lines. The psychological impact of being surrounded or attacked from unexpected directions added to the chaos faced by opposing forces. The Hyksos also made effective use of the terrain, choosing battlegrounds that favored their mobile units. Open plains and river deltas allowed chariots to operate freely, while natural obstacles were used to channel and trap enemy forces. They understood the importance of positioning and timing, often attacking at moments when enemy readiness was low or during adverse conditions such as dusk or dawn. Surprise tactics, including night raids and ambushes, were integral to Hyksos' strategy. These operations disrupted supply lines, weakened garrisons, and demoralized Egyptian troops. The element of unpredictability was a force multiplier, as it forced enemies to remain constantly vigilant, stretching their resources thin. Unlike Egyptian warfare, which often intertwined battle with religious ritual and the demonstration of royal power, the Hyksos fought with pragmatism and efficiency. Their objective was clear: to win decisively with minimal losses. This practical mindset allowed them to adapt quickly, learn from setbacks, and innovate continuously on the battlefield. The effectiveness of Hyksos tactics is evidenced by their decades-long control over parts of Egypt despite persistent opposition. However, their success also pushed Egyptian rulers to reform and modernize their own military strategies, leading to the eventual rise of an Egyptian army that could match and surpass Hyksos' capabilities. The Hyksos understood that the battlefield was as much a realm of the mind as of physical combat. Beyond their tangible weapons and tactics, they employed psychological warfare to weaken their enemy's resolve and magnify their own presence as a formidable force. This strategic use of fear, intimidation, and cultural symbolism played a crucial role in their military success and enduring legacy. The sight of Hyksos warriors mounted on fast-moving chariots, raining arrows with deadly accuracy, would have been both terrifying and bewildering to Egyptian soldiers who had never encountered such mobile warfare. The chariot itself became a symbol of power and invincibility, its thunderous approach striking fear into the hearts of opposing infantry. Moreover, the Hyksos carried with them foreign gods, symbols, and cultural practices that set them apart from native Egyptians. Their worship of deities such as Baal and Resheph, gods associated with storms and war, added an aura of mystery and divine sanction to their military campaigns. This religious otherness may have enhanced their psychological impact, as Egyptians often linked military success with the favor of their own gods. The presence of strange rituals and unfamiliar iconography could foster fear and uncertainty among local populations and soldiers alike. Hyksos rulers also used propaganda to legitimize their rule and assert dominance. Inscriptions and monuments, though scarce, reflect efforts to portray themselves not merely as foreign conquerors, but as rightful kings and protectors. The blending of Egyptian and Levantine cultural elements in art and architecture served to establish a narrative of power that was both foreign and familiar, an intentional message to both supporters and opponents. Conversely, the Egyptians responded with their own propaganda, portraying the Hyksos as chaotic and barbaric invaders in historical records. New Kingdom texts often depicted the Hyksos as destructive outsiders who disrupted Ma'at, the cosmic order, thus justifying their eventual expulsion as a restoration of balance and divine justice. This demonization shaped the Egyptian collective memory and influenced how subsequent generations viewed the Hyksos. The psychological battle extended beyond direct combat to the realms of ideology and culture, where both sides sought to influence perceptions and morale. The Hyksos' combination of military innovation and psychological warfare created a multifaceted threat that challenged Egypt on multiple fronts. The Hyksos' occupation of the Nile Delta was a shock to traditional Egyptian military doctrine and political power, forcing native Egyptians to adapt quickly to a new and formidable enemy. For decades, the Hyksos maintained control through superior weapons, innovative tactics, and strategic fortifications. However, the indigenous Egyptian rulers, especially those from the Theban dynasty in Upper Egypt, gradually began to study and adopt the very military innovations that had once threatened their sovereignty. One of the most significant Egyptian countermeasures was the adoption of the horse-drawn chariot. Initially a terrifying and unfamiliar weapon, the chariot became central to Egyptian military reforms. Pharaohs such as Seqenenretao and Kamose led campaigns aimed at resisting Hyksos control, and by their time, Egyptian forces began to integrate chariotry into their armies. The chariot offered enhanced mobility, allowing Egyptian commanders to execute similar hit-and-run tactics and battlefield maneuvers that had previously belonged exclusively to the Hyksos. In addition to chariots, the Egyptians improved their weaponry, adopting bronze tools and composite bows that matched Hyksos' firepower. Their craftsmen refined metallurgy techniques to produce stronger, more effective weapons and armor. This technological leap was crucial in evening the odds on the battlefield. Fortifications also evolved as Egyptians built more robust defensive structures inspired by Hyksos designs. The mud brick walls, bastions, and moats seen in Hyksos strongholds influenced Egyptian city planning, especially in strategic locations vulnerable to attack. This architectural borrowing enhanced the security of Egyptian settlements and military installations. Moreover, Egyptian military leaders began to shift their tactical approach, embracing greater flexibility and mobility. Battles moved away from rigid formations and ceremonial displays toward more practical, coordinated strikes that prioritized battlefield advantage. The integration of specialized troops, including chariot units, archers, and infantry working in tandem, marked a significant evolution in Egyptian warfare. These military reforms culminated in the campaigns of Pharaoh Ahmose I, who ultimately expelled the Hyksos from Avaris and reunified the Egypt, ushering in the New Kingdom, an era marked by military expansion and imperial ambition. The lessons learned during the Hyksos period equipped the Egyptians with the tools and knowledge to become one of the ancient world's most formidable military powers. The Hyksos may have ruled Egypt for only a brief chapter in its long history, but their impact on the evolution of ancient warfare was profound and enduring. Their military innovations, introduced during the tumultuous Second Intermediate Period, reshaped not only Egyptian martial practices, but also influenced the broader geopolitical landscape of the ancient Near East. One of the most significant legacies of the Hyksos was the introduction and popularization of the horse-drawn chariot. This technology revolutionized the speed, mobility, and tactical options available to armies across the region. After the Hyksos were expelled, the Egyptians fully embraced chariotry, integrating it into their military elite. Chariot warfare became synonymous with power and prestige during the New Kingdom, featuring prominently in the armies of great pharaohs like Thutmose III and Ramesses II. The Hyksos had effectively introduced a new military paradigm that endured for centuries. Similarly, the Hyksos legacy is visible in the widespread adoption of bronze weaponry and composite bows by the Egyptians. These weapons elevated Egyptian military effectiveness, enabling them to expand their empire and engage in far-reaching campaigns. The craftsmanship and metallurgical skills pioneered or refined by the Hyksos set a standard for weapon production that influenced not only Egypt, but neighboring cultures. The tactical doctrines of the Hyksos, emphasizing mobility, psychological warfare, and combined arms, also left a lasting mark. The Egyptians evolved from their earlier, more static fighting styles into a dynamic military force capable of rapid maneuvers, coordinated attacks, and strategic flexibility. These changes were vital in Egypt's rise to regional dominance and imperial expansion. Beyond the battlefield, the Hyksos contributed to a cultural and technological exchange between Egypt and the Levant. Their presence facilitated trade and interaction, introducing new ideas, crafts, and artistic styles that enriched Egyptian civilization. While the Hyksos rulers were often vilified in Egyptian records as foreign oppressors, their contributions helped to catalyze a period of transformation. In military terms, the Hyksos era serves as an early example of how cross-cultural encounters can accelerate technological and tactical evolution. Their story underscores the complexity of ancient conflicts, not just as clashes of armies, but as moments where ideas, technologies, and cultures converged and reshaped history. The thunder of Hyksos chariots may have faded into the dust of time, but their echoes continue to resonate across the annals of history. What began as a foreign incursion into the fertile lands of the Nile Delta became a catalyst for profound transformation. A turning point where ancient Egypt was forced to rethink, rebuild, and reinvent its military might. The Hyksos were not merely conquerors. They were bearers of new technology and tactics that shattered old paradigms. Their swift chariots, bronze weapons, and strategic acumen challenged the entrenched powers of Egypt and ignited a military revolution. From their innovations rose the imperial might of the new kingdom, whose pharaohs wielded the very tools the Hyksos introduced to expand Egypt's reach far beyond its borders. Yet beyond battles and weapons, the Hyksos legacy is a story of cultural fusion, where East met West, tradition met innovation, and conflict spurred progress. In the shifting sands of history, they remind us that the tides of war often carry more than destruction. They carry the seeds of change. As we look back to those chariots racing across ancient battlefields, we see not just an invasion, but the forging of an empire, shaped by the clash of civilizations and the enduring power of adaptation. The story of the Hyksos is a testament to the complex forces that shape history, a chapter marked by conflict, transformation, and the unyielding march of progress.